Have you ever made a promise to someone you loved, only to discover that your kindness was being manipulated in the most heartbreaking way imaginable? Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you never even thought to question their intentions, until one day everything you believed came crashing down around you? Well, let me tell you what happened to me after my husband died, because this story still keeps me awake at night, and I know that sharing it might help someone else who's going through something similar. My name is Sarah, and 3 years ago, I lost the love of my life in a car accident that happened on a rainy Tuesday evening when he was driving home from work. Michael was only 34 years old. We had been married for 7 beautiful years, and we were planning to start a family that very year. When the police officer knocked on my door that night, I remember thinking that someone must have made a mistake, that there was no way the universe could be so cruel as to take away the person who made my world make sense. But it wasn't a mistake. My husband was gone, and I was left with a grief so profound that I couldn't even recognize myself in the mirror anymore. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and whispered condolences, of people telling me that time would heal, that I was young enough to start over, that he would want me to be happy. But how could I be happy when the other half of my soul had been ripped away? How could I even think about moving forward when every corner of our home reminded me of him, when I could still smell his cologne on his pillow, when I found myself setting the table for two before remembering that I was alone now? In those first terrible weeks after Michael died, his mother Barbara became my lifeline in ways I never expected. She had lost her only son, and I had lost my husband, and we clung to each other like two drowning people in an ocean of grief. Barbara had always been kind to me during our marriage, though we weren't particularly close. Michael had been her miracle baby, born after years of fertility struggles and 2 heartbreaking miscarriages. She had raised him alone after her husband left when Michael was just 5 years old, working 2 jobs to make sure he had everything he needed, sacrificing her own happiness and dreams so that her son could thrive. I had always admired her strength and her devotion to Michael, and I knew that his death had destroyed her in ways that perhaps only I could understand. She would call me every single day, sometimes multiple times, crying so hard that she couldn't catch her breath, telling me that she didn't know how to live in a world where her baby boy no longer existed. I would drive to her small apartment across town, and we would sit together for hours, looking through photo albums, sharing memories, crying until we had no tears left. She told me stories about Michael's childhood that I had never heard before, about the time he broke his arm trying to climb a tree to rescue a kitten, about how he would save his allowance to buy her flowers on Mother's Day, about the pride in his eyes when he graduated from college and told her that everything he had achieved was because of her. These moments with Barbara were painful and beautiful all at once, and I felt like we were building a bond forged in shared loss, a connection that transcended the typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship. About 2 months after the funeral, Barbara called me one evening sounding different than usual. Her voice was shaky, but there was something else there too, something that sounded almost like embarrassment or shame. She explained that she was having serious financial difficulties, that she had taken time off work after Michael's death, and her employer had been understanding but couldn't hold her position any longer, that she had some medical bills from a procedure she'd had the previous year that were piling up, that her rent had been raised and she was struggling to keep up with basic expenses. She apologized profusely for even bringing it up, said she knew I was dealing with my own grief and didn't want to burden me, but she didn't know where else to turn and she was genuinely scared that she might end up homeless. My heart broke for her all over again. Here was this woman who had given everything to raise the man I loved, who had sacrificed so much throughout her life, and now in her time of need she was suffering alone. I couldn't bear the thought of Michael's mother struggling like this, couldn't imagine what he would think if he knew I had the means to help her and didn't. The life insurance policy Michael had through his job had paid out, and while the money couldn't bring him back or fill the massive void in my life, it did mean that I was financially stable for the foreseeable future. Without even thinking twice, I told Barbara that I would help her, that Michael would want me to take care of his mother, that we were family and family takes care of each other. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I told Barbara that I would give her $380 every month to help with her expenses. It wasn't an enormous amount, but it was enough to make a real difference in covering her rent and basic bills, and it was something I could afford without putting myself in financial jeopardy. The number wasn't random either. Michael's birthday was March 8th. The 3rd month and 8th day, and somehow giving her $380 felt like a way to keep his memory alive, to honor him by taking care of the person who had loved him first and longest. Barbara cried when I told her, said I was an angel sent from heaven, that Michael had chosen the perfect woman to spend his life with, that she didn't know what she would do without me. She promised it would only be temporary, just until she could get back on her feet and find a new job, maybe 6 months at the most. I told her not to worry about timelines, that I was happy to help for as long as she needed, that it gave me comfort to know I was doing something Michael would approve of. She hugged me so tightly that day, and I remember feeling like maybe, just maybe, something good could come from this tragedy. That maybe Michael's legacy could live on through the way we took care of each other. I set up an automatic transfer from my account to hers, $380 on the first day of every month like clockwork. For the first few months, Barbara would call me as soon as the money appeared in her account, thanking me profusely, updating me on her job search, telling me about interviews she had lined up or applications she had submitted. She would invite me over for dinner, cook Michael's favorite meals, and we would talk about him for hours, keeping his memory alive in the stories we shared and the love we both still felt so deeply. It became a routine, a connection that helped both of us navigate the impossible landscape of life after loss. I felt good about what I was doing, felt like I was honoring Michael's memory in a tangible way, felt like I was being the kind of person he had always believed I was. The money was going to help his mother survive, and that mattered more to me than anything else I could have spent it on. I didn't need fancy vacations or expensive clothes or a new car. What I needed was to feel like Michael's death hadn't been completely meaningless, that something positive could emerge from the wreckage of my shattered life. But as the months turned into a year and then into 2 years, I started to notice some things that didn't quite add up. Barbara had stopped mentioning her job search, stopped talking about interviews or applications, stopped acting like someone who was actively trying to improve her financial situation. When I would ask about it, she would get vague, saying that the job market was tough for someone her age, that she was still looking, but nothing seemed to be the right fit, that she was considering going back to school or learning a new skill, but hadn't quite figured out what yet. I tried to be understanding, knowing that grief can make it hard to focus on practical matters, knowing that depression can sap your motivation and make everything feel impossible. But there was something in the way she changed the subject, something in the way she would suddenly start talking about Michael or asking about my life whenever I pressed her about her plans, that made me feel uneasy. Still, I pushed those feelings aside, told myself I was being paranoid or unsympathetic, reminded myself that everyone processes loss differently, and maybe Barbara just needed more time than she had anticipated. Then I started noticing other things, small details that individually seemed insignificant, but together began to paint a disturbing picture. When I would visit her apartment, I noticed new things appearing. A large flat-screen television that definitely hadn't been there before. New furniture in her living room. Expensive-looking pieces that seemed out of place for someone who was supposedly struggling to pay rent. Designer handbags casually tossed on her kitchen counter, the kind with recognizable logos that cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars. New clothes hanging in her closet with the tags still on them, high-end brands that I could barely afford even with my insurance money. Her nails were always freshly manicured, her hair professionally colored and styled, and she mentioned going to the spa or getting massages with a casual frequency that seemed bizarre for someone who had been on the verge of homelessness just 2 years earlier. At first, I made excuses for her in my mind. Maybe she had found some things on sale. Maybe they were gifts from friends. Maybe she was using credit cards and digging herself into debt. Maybe I was being judgmental or penny-pinching. Maybe I should just be happy that she seemed to be enjoying her life again after the devastating loss of her son. Who was I to police how she spent her money or lived her life? But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away, and it grew stronger every time I saw something new. Every time she mentioned some activity or purchase that seemed incompatible with the story she had told me about her financial struggles. Have you ever had that feeling where you know something is wrong but you're afraid to look too closely because you don't want to face what you might find? That's exactly where I was. I didn't want to believe that Barbara, the woman who had raised the love of my life, the woman I had bonded with over our shared grief, could be deceiving me. I didn't want to acknowledge the growing suspicion that was taking root in my heart because it felt like a betrayal of Michael's memory, like doubting his mother was somehow doubting him. But the signs kept multiplying, and they became harder and harder to ignore. One day when I stopped by her apartment unannounced, I noticed vacation photos on her refrigerator, pictures of Barbara on a beach somewhere tropical, holding colorful drinks and looking happier and more relaxed than I had seen her in years. When I asked about it, she seemed flustered, said it had been a last-minute trip with some girlfriends, a chance to get away and clear her head. But a beach vacation isn't cheap, especially not the resort she appeared to be staying at in the photos. And I couldn't understand how someone who needed $380 every month just to survive could afford such an extravagant getaway. The breaking point came on what would have been Michael's 37th birthday. I had been dreading that day for weeks, knowing it would be emotionally devastating to mark another year of life he would never live, another birthday cake with candles he would never blow out. I decided to visit Barbara early that morning, thinking we could spend the day together, maybe visit Michael's grave and share our memories and help each other through the pain. When I pulled up to her apartment building, I sat in my car for a moment, gathering my strength, trying to prepare myself for the emotional marathon ahead. That's when I saw her leaving her building, and my breath caught in my throat. Barbara was dressed in expensive athletic wear, the kind with designer logos that cost more than my entire gym wardrobe combined. She was carrying a yoga mat and chatting animatedly on her phone, laughing about something, looking carefree and energetic and completely unlike a woman drowning in financial problems. But what really shocked me was what I saw parked in her designated spot. A brand new car, sleek and shiny, with temporary dealer plates still visible. Not just any car, but a luxury vehicle, the kind I had always dreamed of owning but couldn't justify spending money on even with my insurance payout. I sat there frozen, watching her get into that car, watching her drive away without a care in the world, and something inside me finally snapped. I waited until she was gone, then I sat in my car and cried. Not the gentle tears of grief I had grown accustomed to, but angry, frustrated, betrayed tears that burned my cheeks and made my chest heave with sobs. How could she do this? How could she take my money? Money I was giving her out of love and respect for Michael's memory. Money I was giving her because I thought she was struggling and needed help, and use it to fund a lifestyle of luxury and leisure. How could she look me in the eye, month after month, accepting my help while she was clearly living better than I was? The betrayal felt almost as profound as losing Michael had felt, because it wasn't just about the money. It was about the trust, the bond I thought we had built, the shared grief I thought connected us. It was about the fact that she had exploited my love for her son, had manipulated my desire to honor his memory, had turned my kindness into her personal ATM machine. I felt stupid and naive and used, and I was furious at myself for not seeing it sooner, for ignoring all the signs that had been right in front of my face for months. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with questions and anger and hurt. Should I confront her immediately? Should I just stop the payments without explanation? Should I demand that she pay me back? Part of me wanted to call her right then and scream at her, to tell her exactly what I thought of her deception and her manipulation. But another part of me, the part that was still grieving and exhausted and desperately sad, just wanted to curl up in bed and pretend none of this was happening. I spent the rest of Michael's birthday alone, not visiting his grave like I had planned, not honoring his memory in the way I had intended, but instead obsessing over spreadsheets and bank statements, calculating exactly how much money I had given Barbara over the past 2 years. The number made me feel sick. Almost $10,000. Money that could have been saved or invested or donated to causes Michael cared about, instead lining the pockets of someone who had lied to me from the very beginning. I looked through social media, something I rarely did, and found Barbara's Facebook page that I hadn't checked in months. Her privacy settings were loose and I could see everything. Posts about her new car, photos from not one but multiple vacations, check-ins at expensive restaurants and spa days and shopping trips. She was living her best life, and she was doing it with my money, all while maintaining the fiction that she was barely scraping by. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation we'd had, every time she had thanked me for helping her, every tear she had shed while talking about how hard things were. Had any of it been real? Had she been laughing at me behind my back, thinking I was a fool who was easy to manipulate? Or had she somehow convinced herself that she deserved this, that because she had raised Michael and sacrificed for him, she was entitled to live off his widow indefinitely? I thought about Michael and what he would think of this situation, what he would want me to do. Would he be angry at his mother for deceiving me? Would he understand her need to find joy and comfort after his death, even if it meant being dishonest about her circumstances? Would he think I was being petty for caring about money when we had lost something infinitely more valuable? These questions tormented me, and I realized that I would never know the answers because Michael was gone and I was alone in this mess, trying to figure out the right thing to do without his guidance or support. The next morning, I made a decision. I needed to know the truth, the whole truth, not just what I could piece together from social media posts and glimpses of her apartment. I needed to hear it from Barbara herself, needed to look her in the eye and ask her directly what she had been doing with my money and why she had lied to me for so long. I deserved that much at least, deserved to understand how someone I had trusted and supported could betray me so completely. I called her and asked if I could come over that afternoon, told her there was something important we needed to discuss. She sounded cheerful and unsuspecting. Said of course she always loved seeing me. Maybe we could order lunch and make an afternoon of it. The casual way she spoke, the complete absence of guilt or awareness in her voice made my anger burn even hotter. She had no idea that I had discovered her secret. No clue that her comfortable arrangement was about to come crashing down. Part of me wanted to confront her right there on the phone, to not give her time to prepare excuses or lies, but I knew this conversation needed to happen in person, face to face, where she couldn't hide behind a screen or a voice. When I arrived at her apartment that afternoon, Barbara greeted me with a warm hug and an offer of coffee. Her apartment looked even more lavish than I remembered, with new artwork on the walls and fresh flowers in expensive vases. She was wearing jewelry I hadn't seen before, delicate pieces that caught the light and probably cost more than several months of the payments I had been sending her. We sat down in her living room, on furniture that I had probably paid for without knowing it, and she chattered happily about her week, about a book club she had joined, about plans to redecorate her bedroom. I let her talk, watching her closely, searching for any sign of guilt or discomfort. But there was nothing. She was completely at ease, completely confident that her deception remained undiscovered. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I interrupted her mid-sentence and said, "Barbara, I saw you yesterday morning. I saw your new car, and I've been noticing a lot of other new things in your life lately. I think we need to talk about the money I've been giving you." The change in her expression was immediate and dramatic. The warm smile disappeared, replaced by something that looked almost like panic, her eyes going wide and her face paling noticeably. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, clearly scrambling for words. What do you mean?" she finally managed, her voice much quieter than it had been moments before. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady despite the anger and hurt churning inside me. "You told me you needed help with rent and bills, that you were struggling financially after Michael died. But you have a brand new luxury car, you've been on multiple vacations, you have designer bags and new furniture, and you're clearly not struggling at all. So I need you to tell me the truth right now. What have you been doing with the money I've been giving you?" The silence that followed was deafening, stretching out between us like a chasm. Barbara's hands were trembling slightly, and she looked down at her lap, unable to meet my eyes. "Sarah," she started, her voice cracking. "I can explain. It's not what you think." But even as she said it, we both knew that it was exactly what I thought, and whatever explanation she offered would be nothing more than justification for a betrayal that couldn't be justified. She tried several different approaches, her story shifting and changing as she spoke, contradicting herself in ways that made it clear she was making it up as she went along. First, she said that she had come into some money from a distant relative who had passed away, but she hadn't mentioned it because she didn't want me to stop helping her or feel like I had wasted my money. Then she claimed that she had started a successful online business, but again, she hadn't told me because she was embarrassed about the type of products she was selling. When I pressed her on the details, asked her specific questions that would be easy to answer if these stories were true, she stumbled and backtracked, her lies becoming more and more transparent. Finally, I cut through all the nonsense and said, "Just stop. Please just stop lying to me and tell me the truth. Did you ever actually need this money? Were you ever really in financial trouble, or was that whole story a lie from the beginning?" What she said next was somehow even worse than I had imagined. With tears streaming down her face, Barbara admitted that she had never been in serious financial trouble. Yes, she had taken some time off work after Michael died, and yes, she had some bills, but nothing that she couldn't have managed on her own with a little budgeting and perhaps some temporary lifestyle adjustments. But when she saw how willing I was to help, how eager I was to honor Michael's memory by taking care of her, she couldn't resist the temptation. The money I was giving her, she explained in a voice barely above a whisper, was like a gift, a blessing, something that made her life easier and more comfortable. She had convinced herself that she deserved it, that after everything she had been through, after losing her only child, after sacrificing so much during Michael's childhood, she had earned the right to have some luxury and pleasure in her life. The money meant I could afford things she had always wanted, but could never justify spending her own hard-earned money on. She could travel, could pamper herself, could live the kind of life she had always dreamed of, but had never been able to afford while raising a child alone. "Don't you think I deserve some happiness after everything I've lost?" she asked through her tears, and I felt my anger reach a boiling point. How dare she try to make this about her grief, about her loss, when she had been exploiting mine? How dare she act like she was the victim here when she had spent 2 years lying to my face and stealing from me? Because that's what it was. Theft. Even if I had given the money willingly based on false pretenses. I stood up, my whole body shaking with rage and hurt. "You deserve happiness?" I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "We all deserve happiness, Barbara. I deserve happiness too. But my husband is dead and his mother has been manipulating me and using my grief to fund her shopping sprees and vacations. Do you have any idea how betrayed I feel right now? Do you understand that you didn't just take my money? You took my trust. You took the bond I thought we had. You took the one good thing I thought came out of Michael's death and you destroyed it?" She was sobbing now, begging me to understand, to forgive her, saying she never meant to hurt me, that it had started innocently enough and just gotten out of hand, that she knew it was wrong but she couldn't bring herself to stop. But I was done listening to her excuses. I told her that the payments were stopping immediately, that I was canceling the automatic transfer as soon as I got home, that I never wanted to hear from her again unless it was to apologize sincerely and offer to pay me back, which we both knew would never happen. She grabbed my arm as I headed toward the door, pleading with me not to leave like this, not to throw away our relationship over money, reminding me that she was still Michael's mother, and that he would want us to forgive each other and stay close. That's when I finally broke, when I finally let out all the anger and pain I had been holding back. "Don't you dare," I said, pulling my arm away from her grip. "Don't you dare use Michael to manipulate me anymore. You've been using his memory to justify stealing from me for 2 years, and I won't let you do it for one more second. Michael would be ashamed of what you've done. He would be heartbroken to know that his mother exploited his widow's grief and kindness like this. So don't tell me what he would want, because the Michael I knew would never want this." I left her apartment with her sobs echoing behind me, and I drove home in a state of numb shock. The anger was still there, burning hot and fierce, but there was also a profound sadness, a sense of having lost something important even though what I had lost was built on lies to begin with. I had lost the comfort of thinking that Barbara and I shared a special bond, the comfort of believing that I was honoring Michael by caring for his mother, the comfort of feeling like something good had come from tragedy. Now all of that was gone, revealed as a fiction, and I was left with nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal and the painful knowledge that I had been played for a fool. When I got home, I immediately logged into my bank account and canceled the automatic transfer, watching that routine monthly payment disappear from my scheduled transactions with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. $380, Michael's birthday, a number that had meant something beautiful and was now tainted with deception and greed. In the days that followed, I went through all the stages of grief all over again, but this time I was grieving the loss of a relationship, the loss of trust, the loss of my own naivety. Barbara called and texted repeatedly, sometimes apologizing, sometimes trying to justify herself, sometimes accusing me of being cruel and unforgiving, sometimes begging me to reconsider. I didn't respond to any of it. I blocked her number, blocked her on social media, cut off every avenue of communication because I knew that nothing she could say would change what had happened or make me feel better about it. Some of my friends, the few who knew about the monthly payments, told me I should take legal action, that what Barbara had done might constitute fraud or theft by deception. But I didn't have the energy or the desire to go down that road, to drag this ugly situation through the courts and make it even more public and painful than it already was. The money was gone, and pursuing it would cost me more in legal fees and emotional energy than I would ever recover. What hurt the most, what kept me up at night even more than the financial betrayal, was the realization that Barbara had never really cared about me as a person. I had thought we had bonded over our shared loss, that our grief had created a genuine connection between us. But now I understood that she had only seen me as a resource, a source of income, someone whose love for Michael could be exploited for her own benefit. Every conversation we had, every tear she had cried, every memory she had shared, all of it had been tainted by her ulterior motive. She had been playing a part, performing grief and gratitude while secretly living it up on my dime. And the worst part was that I would never know what was real and what was performance, which moments of connection had been genuine and which had been calculated manipulation. I also had to grapple with my own role in what had happened, my own blindness to the warning signs. Looking back, the red flags had been there from early on, if only I had been willing to see them. But I had wanted so desperately to believe in the narrative I had created, the story of two women supporting each other through unbearable loss, that I had ignored evidence that contradicted it. I had let my grief cloud my judgment, had let my desire to honor Michael override my common sense. In some ways, I was angry at myself almost as much as I was angry at Barbara, angry that I had been so trusting, so willing to be used. But I also tried to give myself some grace, to recognize that grief makes us vulnerable, that wanting to believe the best in people isn't a character flaw, even when it leads to being taken advantage of. I had acted out of love and generosity, and the fact that those qualities had been exploited didn't make them wrong or shameful. Slowly, painfully, I began to process what had happened and figure out how to move forward. I had to accept that the relationship with Barbara was over, that there was no going back to a place of trust or affection even if part of me wished we could. I had to accept that the money was gone, and that dwelling on it would only make me more bitter and resentful. I had to accept that this betrayal was now part of my story, part of the complicated legacy of Michael's death, another loss to add to the collection. But I also had to figure out what to do with all the anger and hurt I was carrying, how to process these feelings in a way that wouldn't consume me or turn me into a cynical, untrusting person. I started seeing a therapist, something I probably should have done much sooner after Michael's death, and talking through everything with a neutral professional helped me gain perspective and work through the complex emotions I was experiencing. My therapist helped me see that Barbara's actions were about her own character flaws and choices, not about my worth or my judgment, and that being betrayed didn't mean I had done anything wrong. I also reconnected with friends I had somewhat isolated myself from during the worst of my grief, and their support and perspective helped tremendously. Many of them had suspected that something wasn't right with the Barbara situation, but hadn't wanted to say anything because they didn't want to seem like they were judging my choices or adding to my pain. Hearing them validate my anger and my hurt, hearing them confirm that what Barbara had done was genuinely wrong and not something I should just brush off or forgive easily, helped me trust my own judgment again. They reminded me of who I was before this happened, of the strong, smart, capable person I had been before grief and betrayal had shaken my confidence. They helped me remember that one person's deception didn't mean everyone would deceive me, that I could still be generous and kind without being stupid or naive. As more time passed, I found myself thinking less about what Barbara had done and more about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Michael had been gone for 3 years, and while the grief would never completely disappear, it had evolved into something I could carry alongside joy and hope and plans for the future. I realized that I had been so focused on honoring his memory through this monthly payment to his mother that I hadn't thought about other ways to keep his spirit alive, ways that would actually reflect who he was and what he valued. Michael had been passionate about education and had always talked about the kids in underprivileged communities who didn't have access to good schools or resources. So I decided to start a scholarship fund in his name, using some of the insurance money to create something lasting and meaningful that would help students pursue their dreams the way Michael had pursued his. It felt right in a way that the payments to Barbara never really had, even before I knew about her deception. Setting up the scholarship fund became a healing project for me, a way to transform my grief and anger into something positive and productive. I worked with local schools to identify deserving students, created an application process, and eventually awarded the first scholarship on what would have been Michael's 38th birthday. Meeting the student who received it, hearing about their dreams and their challenges, and seeing the hope in their eyes when they learned they would get help paying for college gave me a sense of purpose and connection that I hadn't felt since Michael died. This was what honoring his memory should look like, I realized. Not paying for his mother's vacations and shopping sprees, but making a real difference in the lives of young people who needed support and opportunity. Michael would have loved this, would have been proud of it, and knowing that brought me more comfort than anything else had in 3 years. I wish I could say that Barbara eventually apologized sincerely or tried to make amends, but that's not what happened. After I blocked her and cut off contact, she made a few attempts to reach me through mutual acquaintances, but her messages were always the same mixture of self-justification and requests to resume our relationship, with no genuine acknowledgement of the harm she had caused or the trust she had broken. Eventually, she stopped trying, and I heard through the grapevine that she had moved to another state, probably to start fresh somewhere without the awkwardness of running into me or people who knew what she had done. Part of me hoped that she felt guilty, that she lay awake at night thinking about how she had exploited her dead son's widow, but honestly, I don't think she did. People who can rationalize that kind of behavior, who can convince themselves that they deserve whatever they can get regardless of how they get it, rarely experience the kind of deep remorse that would lead to real change or accountability. And you know what? I'm okay with that now. I'm okay with the fact that Barbara will probably never see herself as the villain in this story. Will probably always believe that she was justified in doing what she did. Her lack of remorse and accountability isn't my problem to solve, isn't my burden to carry. I did what I thought was right based on the information I had, and when I discovered the truth, I took action to protect myself and my resources. I don't owe her forgiveness, don't owe her a relationship, don't owe her anything at all. What she did was wrong. Full stop. And recognizing that doesn't make me unforgiving or bitter. It makes me someone with healthy boundaries who refuses to be exploited. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation, that you can let go of anger without letting someone back into your life, that protecting yourself isn't the same as being hard-hearted. These lessons came at a high cost, but they're valuable nonetheless. Looking back on everything that happened, I can see now that Barbara's betrayal, as painful as it was, taught me important things about myself and about how to navigate life after loss. It taught me that grief can make us vulnerable to manipulation, that people will sometimes exploit our best qualities for their own gain, but also that we have the strength to recover and move forward even when we've been badly hurt. It taught me to trust my instincts, to pay attention to red flags even when I don't want to see them, to ask questions and seek truth rather than accepting convenient narratives. It taught me that honoring someone's memory is about living according to their values and making a positive impact in the world, not about blindly supporting everyone who is connected to them. Most importantly, it taught me that I am stronger and more resilient than I ever knew, that I can survive loss upon loss and still find reasons to hope and love and trust again. The money is gone, and I'll never get it back. The relationship with Barbara is destroyed beyond repair, and that's a loss too, even though what I lost wasn't what I thought it was. But I'm still here, still moving forward, still finding ways to honor Michael that actually reflect who he was and what mattered to him. I've created something beautiful and lasting out of tragedy, and I've learned to protect myself without closing off my heart completely. I've learned that being kind and generous doesn't require being naive or allowing myself to be used, that I can help others without sacrificing my own well-being or security. These lessons are worth more than $10,000, even though I wish I had learned them some other way. If you're reading this or watching this video, and you've experienced something similar, I want you to know that you're not alone and you're not stupid. Grief makes us vulnerable, and there are people in this world who will take advantage of that vulnerability without a second thought. It's not your fault if you've been betrayed by someone you trusted, and you don't have to forgive them or maintain a relationship with them just because society tells you that family is important or that holding grudges is wrong. You have the right to protect yourself, to set boundaries, to walk away from people who hurt you regardless of who they are or what relationship you once had with them. Your kindness and your love are valuable things, and you deserve to give them to people who will treasure them rather than exploit them. Trust your instincts, pay attention to inconsistencies and red flags, and remember that it's always okay to ask questions or verify information, even when it feels uncomfortable or accusatory. You're not being paranoid or untrusting, you're being smart and self-protective. And if you're someone who has lost a loved one, and you're trying to figure out how to honor their memory, please know that there are so many meaningful ways to do it that don't involve giving money to people who may or may not actually need it. Consider starting a scholarship fund like I did, or volunteering for causes that mattered to your loved one, or simply living according to the values they held dear. Consider talking about them, sharing their stories, keeping their memory alive through the way you live your own life. These things are free or low cost, but they're infinitely more valuable than monthly payments that disappear into someone else's bank account without making any real difference in the world. The best way to honor someone we've lost is to make sure that their impact continues, that the love and wisdom they brought into the world keeps rippling outward long after they're gone. I want to hear from you now because I know I'm not the only person who has dealt with something like this. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted after experiencing a major loss? Have you ever given help to someone only to discover they were taking advantage of your kindness? How did you handle it, and what did you learn from the experience? Please share your stories in the comments below, because I think we can all learn from each other and find comfort in knowing we're not alone in these difficult situations. If this story touched your heart or helped you in any way, please leave a like on this video. Your engagement really helps us reach more people who might need to hear this message, who might be going through something similar and feeling alone and confused. And if you want to hear more real stories about life, loss, love, betrayal, and everything in between, please subscribe to I Live to Tell and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Understanding these kinds of complicated human experiences, learning from each other's stories, and building a community of people who support each other through hard times is what this channel is all about. And I'm so grateful to each and every one of you who takes the time to watch, comment, and share. Remember, your story matters, your experiences matter, and you deserve to be heard and supported. Thank you so much for being here with me today, and I'll see you in the next video.